Good morning. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, October 17th. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the chair of this committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Ellison, Councilmember Reich, Councilmember Goodman, and Councilmember Gordon. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We've got 5 items on the agenda today, including 2 quasi-judicial hearings, but we'll first dispense with the consent agenda. Number 3 is referring to staff the subject matter of an ordinance amending regulations related to inclusionary zoning. Number 4 is the rezoning application submitted by Daryl and Beverly Koopman for the property located at 2546 Johnson Street Northeast. And item 5 is the rezoning and alley vacation application submitted by Common Bond Properties for several addresses located at Marshall Street Northeast and Lowry Avenue Northeast. Is there any discussion on these items, or would any committee members like to pull anything off? Not seeing anything, I move approval of items number 3 through 5. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Item number 1 is the consideration of appeal by Tim Kean on behalf of Sagrado Corazon de Jesus and the Church of the Incarnation regarding the Planning Commission's approval of a parking variance. And we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Good morning, committee members. The Center for Performing Arts expansion at 30th and Pleasant is a 5-story, 4-floor, from the zoning code standpoint, expansion to allow for accessibility to the existing building and to allow for additional artist studio and performance space. And you see in the report the applications needed, conditional use permit for height, variances, and site plan review. Staff is supportive of the applications. The Planning Commission approved the project unanimously with conditions of approval. At the public hearing, there were neighbors that expressed concern of parking. And as you mentioned, Councilmember Schrader, the Church of Incarnation submitted the appeal application of the Planning Commission decision for the parking variance. And amongst the reasons for the appeal were parking demands in the area being high, including the applicant, the Church of Incarnation, and they also take issue with staff findings, particularly practical difficulty. So I'm just going to walk through our findings and answer questions you may have. I outlined the red is the subject property, blue is the property owned by the appellant. So practical difficulties and unique circumstances do exist with the property for the variance. The subject building is an important building to South Minneapolis. It's a historic resource. It's not locally designated, but still important. And it's associated with the Church of the Incarnation Historic District that was designated last year. The 1923 convent was part of that church for a number of decades and designed by master architectural firm Bertrand and Chamberlain in the period revival style. We want the staff and the city want to see important historic resources like this, designated or not, protected. And building a sensitive addition, as the applicant has done, with a light touch on the first floor, moving the bulk away from that building, is in line with what we want to see and helps protect this historic resource. For finding 2, the applicant is using the property in a reasonable manner that is keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and the comprehensive plan. The applicant is proposing to have an expansion of a permitted use, an educational arts center in the OR2 district. And the purpose of the Minneapolis parking standards is to promote flexibility and recognize that excessive off-street parking conflicts with the city's policies related to transportation, land use, design, and sustainability. I'll note that the parking count seems high for a building for an educational arts center because of some of the because of our calculations for some of the performing arts spaces. But that compared to a school or a place of assembly is often not as high in demand in reality. Schools, a couple hundred days a year, churches every Sunday, and in addition to that, you can count on those parking demand in the area being high, but not the case with an educational arts center. Also note that the proposal is meeting a number of our bulk requirements: floor area ratio, lot area, impervious, building coverage, and the setbacks to the north. So the applicant has really done and tried to do a sensitive job in building this addition. And just for the Arts Center, this proposal is helping artistic organizations expand, protect an important historic building, helping improve accessibility for an existing building, and not allowing parking to dominate the site. I asked the applicant to just submit what what it would look like if you put 8 or 10 or 15, 10 or 19 spaces on the site, and you can see what would happen is it would dominate the site by just having a few parking spaces and not allow for an expansion. And this is something that we likely don't want to see along a community corridor next to a commercial node, and doesn't allow for, like I said, an expansion to take place. So finally, finding 3, the addition would not alter the essential character of the area. We recognize parking demand in this area along 38th Street next to 2 commercial nodes is higher than maybe other areas that have low density residential, but the positives of having the amenities in the area outweigh having a little more parking on street. Also note that for the residents that did come to attend, each of these streets does have access to alleys, and most of them do have off-street parking spaces. So with that, and the applicant working on shared parking agreements in the area, staff found that support in granting and looking to recommend approval for the parking variance.
Thank you. I'll let the record reflect that we've been joined by the Council President. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure I totally understand this. So you have this cool old building that was part of the church that was sold by the church.
Right.
And now they want to build, the people who they sold it to want to build an addition onto the existing building. So the alternative is either build on the surface parking lot or have surface parking lot spaces and don't build?
Sorry. The current conditions are, and I'll try to find an aerial, is these images I showed now are not existing conditions. They are what it would take to build parking spaces that meet our zoning code standards. Those are not there. There currently are 7 parking spaces on site that are non-conforming that are at this back portion of the site. But I just, in showing these renderings, wanted to show what it would look like and how much of the site it would take up by having parking standards that meet our current.
And the proposal is to put a building where that empty spot is.
That's right.
And are there surface parking lots in the area that the church currently uses for their parishioners?
They do have, let's see here. There are, I believe, approximately 25 to 30 spaces on the first floor for the church here. And Lake Country, Montessori, does have about 20 to 30 spaces here that the applicant, Center for Performing Arts, is looking to have a shared parking agreement, but there's nothing that I've seen that's in a formal document saying that there's that the parking. They're working on a shared parking agreement and arrangement for there, and I believe they did outreach to the appellant, but obviously they're not in agreement.
Okay, so it would be good if the appellant could explain how them not having parking is okay, but someone else coming in not having parking is not okay. Because it's not like they have a ton of parking.
No,
either.
no. Right, and like with the appellant, their building's built before the zoning code. You're right. I guess if we looked at what their parking standards would be today, it would be well beyond what they have for off-street parking.
Right, because like in Loring Park, there's tons of cool old buildings and none of them have parking, so it's somewhat unfair to say, new building, you have to solve all our parking problems too. I mean, that's the built form at the time. And we don't like parking lots, surface parking lots anyway, so I'm somewhat confused by this, but thank you for answering my question.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? All right, at this point, I will open the hearing, and I'll first give the appellant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Mr. Kean or a representative, would you like to come up? If you wouldn't mind saying your name and address for the record.
Good morning, all. My name is Kevin McDonough. I pastor the Church of the Incarnation. Privileged to be back with you. I was here with you 2 years ago talking about the historic district designation. Just a quick couple of things. We love the idea of the expansion of the Center for the Performing Arts. I think it's a great amenity for the community. Nothing in what I'm about to say is meant to take away from that. I'd like to address directly a plan to anyone. I'm glad that the chair did, in fact, raise those questions. By doing some realignment on our own space, including how we park and making the changes in parish life necessary to do this, in the last year we've added 50 effective parking spaces without increasing impermeable surface. Has to do with our own discipline. We've just also added a fun little amenity, which is a bobcat that we intend to use to keep 38th Street clean on both sides of the street, and Pleasant Avenue clean on both sides of our street, from the edges of the buildings all the way across, in the hopes we won't lose space. We have felt the pressure. We understand that there's concern in the community, and the neighbors who are not only our neighbors, but in some cases our members, have felt pressured, and so it was in response to that that we've raised it. We believe, finally, I'll only add this to you, we believe that there may be some ways to pursue good urbanistic solutions to parking in this area, and we would volunteer access to our space to help with that. Not envisioned so far by our friends in planning, although we did visit some 2 years ago because we've been aware of this problem for a long time. But with the encouragement of this group, perhaps we could go back to that conversation, increase on-street parking in a safe and conforming way, as is done in other areas in the country, and reduce pressure on the residential area while increasing access for neighborhood businesses on Grand, which we are proud to have in our neighborhood, and good excuses for our people to get jobs and to attend those places, and also accommodate the existing uses in the area.
Thank you. I do have one question. Let's see if
Please.
other people speaking. If I understand correctly, that was property you owned beforehand?
I was not personally involved in that time, but yes, both Lake Country and the Center for Performing Arts were originally part of the complex for
Well,
Incarnation.
I guess what's confusing to me is if you own the property and now after selling that and making money off of that, you're trying to put restrictions on how they can develop it. I just see that as problematic.
Yeah, well, so let me say, first of all, we are supportive of the expansion. We think it'd be great. We think there's some accommodations that can be made that would not only not negatively impact the proposed expansion in the Center for Performing Arts, but also would benefit the neighborhood as a whole. Could I just say that at the time that the parish sold the property, once again, I was not part of those decisions. They significantly precede me, but the traffic, the human traffic use of that part of the city, not human trafficking, thanks be to God, but the human traffic use of that part of the city was significantly less active. We've been part of the growth of that, but also the direction of that portion of South Minneapolis was perceived differently by parish leadership. We think it's a stable, even growing area, likely to be more dense. We'd like to be able to see ourselves and our neighbors, businesses as well as residents, accommodate what is really for all of us a new situation since the time those decisions were made.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Pastor. Why don't you tell us what these ideas are, rather than just suggesting there are some ideas? And
Well,
if
I
they're
will say,
public-
and this is just one possibility, and I don't want to speak for the folk north of 38th Street, as our chair has pointed out, we're no longer owners on that side of the street. But on the south side, we'd ask for some consideration of some changes to the curbing to accommodate back-in angle parking is used, for example, in the Adams Morgan neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and other places in the greater D.C. Baltimore area, which would increase the on-street parking capacity by about 60% without crowding right-of-way, and certainly the property south of 38th on Pleasant are owned by two separate not-for-profits. But I know the church would cooperate with it, and my guess is that Sagrado Corazon de Jesus, which is a Hispanic not-for-profit and owner of the building on the southwest corner of this intersection, they would cooperate as well.
Okay, Mr. Chair, so essentially what you're saying is the city could do something with public right-of-way to solve the parking problem at a time at which we're talking about having less parking and more pedestrian access, more bike lanes and that kind of thing. And so you're asking the Performing Arts Center's project to be kind of held up until the city might or might not do something that you want us to do to solve this problem. Am I getting that right?
That's not an unfair characterization.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. I'm not seeing any other questions.
Thank you.
All right. If you could.
My name is Jean Richardson. I'm a resident at
If you
3640.
could hold on one second. So I just want to make sure the appellant has another chance. If they have no one else speaking, I would be moving on to the next part of the public hearing. No, you're fine. You'll have a chance to speak. We just have a specific order. And
Sure.
Mr. Kean, if you could say your name and address for the record.
My name is Tim Kean, Keane, 60 South 6th Street, Minneapolis, and I am here on behalf of Sagrado de Corazon de Jesus and the Church of the Incarnation. And just to be clear, the two church institutions do support the CFPA and their work and their presence in the community. Their concern is they are by far the largest commercial space user in the 38th and Pleasant Grand area at 12,000 plus square feet. They are asking to nearly triple the size of their rentable area to almost 36,000 square feet without any additional parking. In fact, they're going to reduce the existing off-street parking from 7 spaces to 2. That's the concern, is the parking. We do see that and believe that they could provide and accommodate off-street parking with an underground parking facility under their new building. There's certainly space and dimensions to do that, and they certainly could accommodate their growth requirements and growth parking needs with that option. The real concern is that the background pressure of existing parking, and Incarnation has been at this intersection for over 100 years. They came in horse and buggies when this church was originally established. Sagrado has been here nearly 30 years, and together those churches serve over 3,000 families throughout the day, throughout the week, with church services, support services to the community, educational space for the community, on and on and on. And the intensity with which this intersection is used is well known to the surrounding neighborhood. The addition of this nearly tripling of space for the CFPA should make some accommodation for their own off-street parking requirements. That's the request. I'm not on the clock, or did the clock run out?
No, you're fine. Thanks for checking.
Okay, thank you. And finally, the parking requirements found in the zoning code are well crafted. They've been developed over a long period of generations. They're modified from time to time. And in the present case, we are asking that those parking requirements be enforced. Zoning is a covenant. It's a social covenant. It's an understanding between property owners that we agree to reasonable restrictions on the use of our property, and our neighbors agree to reasonable restrictions on the use of their property. And we all abide by the same rules that are even-handedly applied. And in the current case, with a wave of a wand, the most significant zoning requirement for a commercial expansion in this area is parking. And that is for the benefit of the entire area, that off-street parking is required. To Councilmember Goodman's response, the church has worked very hard on parking issues. We have expanded to 60 off-street parking stalls, where we had about half that. We also have a weekend arrangement with Lake Country, And we are doing our best in tight quarters to accommodate the growth of the church, and that's a good thing. So with that, happy to answer questions.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay. We have at least one other speaker from the community. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'll now give the project applicant an opportunity to address the community. Is the applicant here? If you can state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jackie Hayes. I'm the owner of the Center for Performing Arts. Thanks for a minute to address this appeal. I'm going to read, forgive me, a little bit here. So the Center for Performing Arts is a long-standing community-based arts organization that has occupied this building and served the community for just under 25 years. I've personally led the Center for Performing Arts since its inception. Lived in Kingfield for 15 years, served on Kingfield neighborhood committees, citywide committees, donated land to the community for community gardens and events. Am currently an active member of 38th and Grand Business Group, 38th Street Corridor Committee, to identify the Center for Performing Arts in the appeal as a commercial real estate enterprise. Lends itself to mischaracterizing our long-standing commitment and contribution to the neighborhood and to the city. We believe we have designed an attractive, relevant addition to our existing building that addresses the goals of the city and the needs of the community, with special attention given to the shortage of art spaces in South Minneapolis. CFPA is a complete neighborhood composed of people who come from multiple traditions and work in their spaces in multiple ways. The proposed development would be consistent with general land use policies of the Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth, most particularly relative to the notion of complete neighborhoods. Quote, in 2040, all Minneapolis residents will have access to employment, retail services, healthy food, parks, and other daily needs via walking, biking, and public transit. Roughly half our tenants live within blocks of the building, so they are also neighbors. Our tenants use the space at different times of day, which keeps the impact on the building and the neighborhood in balance. CFPA's tenants and clients consider us an important community resource, and for many of the local businesses housed at CFPA, our building and our community is an important source of their livelihood. Because of CFPA's commitment to sustainable practices, many tenants, students, and families already come to our building from within Kingfield and South Minneapolis using public transportation, biking, and walking. The design of the expansion shows a commitment to extend and support and encourage access to Center for Performing Arts without a personal vehicle by adding bike racks, bike lockers, bike maintenance equipment, and a real-time transit screen to make public transit even easier to use. To address the concerns expressed about additional square footage added, I'd offer the following. The addition increases the rentable square footage by 17,000 square feet from 9,850, so not 35,000 square feet. That's the design adds new accessibility features and circulation spaces. This design is not intended to bring a high-density office. We are short on, we have on waiting room space, on conference room space that serves our existing community. One floor of the expansion is designed to allow existing tenants additional space to simply have more room to do what they already do. We have dance studios and rehearsal studios considered as part of the design. The two performance spaces on the first floor are designed for greater occupancy, primarily on weekend evenings, at a time when there is little or no activity at the intersection of 38th and Pleasant. We have sensitively thought about the impact of the neighborhood relative to parking. We at CFPA are very well aware of the rhythms of the intersection, and having lived there myself, I'm well aware of the dynamics. We have navigated in what I would consider a neighborly way school start times, school end times, church services on Sunday mornings. We have worked around those existing and emerging activities at the intersection by setting up our activities in and around those schedules. With an increase in presence along this section of 38th Street on weekend evenings, when we expect the primary activity to happen in those two performance spaces, we bring safety, presence. It benefits the community, I think, in substantial ways. As noted in the LUA variance section, the site has severe limitations in locating an addition in a way that respects the architecture of the existing building. This unique property has an existing convent on it. It is located along a commercial corridor and it is next to a residential area. The addition is seeking to expand that unique building while at the same time remain committed to respecting its character. Our design team referred to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation in the design of the addition, despite the building not being designated a historic property. As indicated in the LUA and approved by the Planning Commission, the expansion will not alter the locality's essential character. I don't know if you've had access to images. I have them if you're interested to see the street views of how the expansion situates itself. I don't know how to show you this. What am I doing?
Just put it on the overhead. There you go.
There you go. I think there's 3 or 4 of these. So that's it. Here's another view, right? So from the corner, this is how it looks. I think that's it. So those 3 images showing you how it fits well within the character of the location that it's proposed. So I just want to conclude by, first of all, I want to make a couple corrections, right? So Center for Performing Arts does not have 20,000 square feet of land for parking. It's inaccurate. Once the existing building square footage of 4,289 is taken into consideration, in addition to existing setbacks, sidewalks, and community gardens, the result is less than half that number. And then again, just to reiterate, in the appeal, rentable square feet is described as tripling to 35,000. In actuality, it's closer to 27,000. We have conducted what I believe is a thoughtful and inclusive process of inviting neighbors and neighborhood businesses to attend public meetings to provide input and feedback on the design of this project. We are deeply invested in continuing to serve the community. I want to be sure that, the distractions of our neighbors' needs is not, let me just not say any more about that. I want to say that Kingfield Neighborhood Association conducted 2 opportunities at which I was present, and the architectural team showed early designs. I was present at the annual meeting to answer questions, to talk to neighbors, and in fact have incorporated a number of the pieces of input that came from those engagements, not to mention the conversations we've had with at least 50 or 60 arts organizations and groups giving input on their needs. So, I'll just say that the project, we believe is exactly where the vision for the described in the 2040 plan lives, and we believe it will bring economic and cultural vitality to this part of the city. Any questions?
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon.
2 questions.
Yes.
One has to do with shared parking
Yeah.
opportunities in the area. How are those discussions going? Are you close to some kind of agreement?
So since we came in 25 years ago and had an agreement with Lake Country School that allowed us to use their parking lot when they're not in session. earlier this year, I said, let's update that as we began this process. So I have a letter I can submit to you. They they make their parking lot available to us when they are not conducting their own activities. So I have that letter and can share it. I've also spoken with the principal at the school across the street, Hiawatha Prep Academy, and in spirit, you know, he said, of course, you could use our lot when we're not there, but that the church also uses it, and so there's a conversation needed there. So the spirit of sharing existing lots is definitely there, not to mention the formality of one agreement anyway.
Probably at least getting the letter to city staff would be a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know. Aaron, do you have the letter? Okay, I have it with me and can share it.
Then the other thing that came up was parking on site underground. Did you look at that at all?
I know the design team looked at it. I think the complexity is that by the time you, first of all, we're on a residential alley, so I think I don't know, do you want to speak to it, Marcelo? I could invite they did an analysis of it. I think we get 6 spaces because you have to have a ramp that gets to it, and we don't want to do a curb cut onto 38th Street so that we increase risk of safety. I mean, we're right near schools. We don't want to be. So do you want to hear a more official version of that?
Maybe a slight comment I think would be nice to address. Just from my perspective, looking at a lot of projects, it does look like it's very small to fit some kind of underground parking.
It's 9,000 square feet, I think, is all that's available.
So
and
maybe if your expert could just weigh in, that would be useful for us.
Okay. Any other questions before Marcelo comes up?
If that's all right with the chair.
That's perfect. Okay. See, I don't see any other questions. You can come up.
All right, Marcelo.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, so my name is Marcelo Pin. I'm with Alliance, the designers. So just to expand on what Jackie said, exactly the access ramp and the turning radius of cars in order to propose an underground parking, we pretty much eat half of the floor space on the ground level. And you got to remind ourselves that those 2 performance spaces are vital to be at the ground level to create that kind of connection to the neighborhood and accessibility. So I think exploring and going further and trying to kind of carve that access lane, you know, and the parking below, I think it wouldn't be a viable option in this case. So,
thank you. Any other further questions? All right, with that, I'm going to now open the hearing to the members of the public who would like to speak. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes, and that time will be tracked on the timer next to the clerk. Would any members of the public like to speak? And if you can state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jean Richardson. I live at 3644 Pleasant, and first of all, I've been in the neighborhood for 20 years. I have no problem with the current situation. I like my neighbors, the church, the performing arts, the schools, and so forth. Parking right now is at capacity during some of those events, especially when the school comes in the evenings and has their regular parent events. So one of the things that I found offensive when I came to the meeting before was I was told that we had to just get rid of cars in Minneapolis and that people could take bicycles. For those of us who are disabled, bicycles are not an option. The city needs to get over that. I do take public transportation, and I am very, very much a subject matter expert on public transportation in that area. And I can say that the people who are coming into the performing arts to those 2 100-space unit audience spaces, the people that would be coming in would not be compelled to take public transportation or bicycles at night on Saturday and Sunday night in the winter when those spaces are open. So they're going to be compelled to drive, which means that those of us who live there will be in competition. And I don't want to compete. I also would like to bring up that, yes, I do have alley parking. That parking is available when it's not considerably snowy and we can't get into those alleys. And parking is cut in half when we have one-side parking during the wintertime. So those things, taking that into consideration, I do support the idea of back-in parking on one side of the north side so that we could increase the number of spaces and have parallel parking on the other side so we wouldn't have to cut into the curbs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak?
Hi, community members. My name is Chris Roche. I am a resident of Kingfield and also the president of the Kingfield Neighborhood Association Board. So I am here to kind of do two things. The first thing is to say that the Neighborhood Association is supportive of this project. We have written a letter, the staff has seen that letter, supportive of this project as it has been proposed. The board hasn't taken up the specific issue of parking as it has come up over the last month, but I can tell you as kind of the chair of the redevelopment committee in our neighborhood association, we are in favor of active, vibrant, walkable human scale spaces. Just to kind of address the difference between parking and active use, which has kind of come up. I believe that active use, spaces for activity and getting people into spaces is a value to the community, and that whether it is underground parking or surface level parking is not a value to the community. I would reiterate that both of the things, kind of the sentiments of both Jackie from the Center for Performing Arts and Father Kevin, I think you've gotten a very good overview of this, and we look forward as a neighborhood organization to continuing to think about parking and continue to think about how we can kind of work on some creative solutions without supporting any kind of specific ideas. But again, generally supportive of the project, really excited that it's happening, and we would encourage, well, I would say I would encourage you to pass the parking variance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking? If you can come up and say your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Merle Thomas Pulley, and I'm a longtime resident at 3852 Pleasant Avenue in the shadows of this proposed expansion. I'm representing 29 signatures on this petition from our block who oppose this expansion. The petition has been entered into the public record, and just for background, is my understanding that the overlay district is supposed to be in a non-residential structure. Well, I don't know who's living there now, but at one point it was occupied as a residence, and it's also currently being rented as an Airbnb. There, on the website, there's 5 spaces for Airbnb, 5 things to rent. There's also a thing on the website that said they want to put in 2 100-seat auditoriums. Well, I guess they want to put in a 100-seat auditorium. And I'm wondering if that auditorium would be approved if it was a restaurant with no parking, if it was a bingo hall with no parking, if it was a 100-foot banquet hall with no parking. Would the city allow that? This is an albatross that's going to collapse under its own weight. And that it fits in with the neighborhood is not true. It's supposed to be a light touch in redevelopment. This is certainly not a light touch. Asking for 5 variances. Well, we'll put in a couple of shrubs and a bike rack and maybe that'll work. I'm sorry, we're totally opposed to this expansion. And the thing about the church on the weekends is they have 5 masses now, not on just Sunday. They have 3 also on Saturday. The parking lot at Lake Country School is so busy with bumper cars, they're closed in the afternoon. They close the parking lot. This plan should not go back to the drawing board. This plan should go into the shredder. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking?
Yes, my name is Fran Lahnstein, and I'm a resident of the neighborhood. I'm about 7 houses from Incarnation, And I would disagree with Jackie that we got notice of this, that we didn't find out about it till just recently. I understand that the requirements only require that they notify people within 350 feet. Now that's ridiculous. So that includes, that's a church and the schools on the corner is about all that's involved. And there's a lot more people that are concerned with this situation than just there. And I've lived in a neighborhood since 1963. And so I've seen what has happened with the church. And, you know, we're right on Pleasant, so we see all the activity. And, you know, back when we moved in there, most of Incarnation's members in the school and so forth were all residents of the neighborhood. You know, they basically came in, a lot of them were in walking distance. So then we had sort of a decline in the activity or membership at Incarnation in between there, and then it became designated as a Spanish-based church. So there aren't as many residents anymore that are going to that church as there used to be, but there's a lot more from out of the area. I have no problem with Spanish, but the fact that it brings all these people in are non-resident that park there. And as a general rule, you know, I think that Spanish are more religious than us average Catholics. So they have a lot more going on at the church than what would be going on otherwise. And this is evenings and totally all day on Saturday and Sunday and a good part of Friday, but then they have a lot of evening activities too. So it just, in general, brings a lot more cars in. And the school across from the church is a Spanish base also, so they are all coming from out of the area. And they got the buses, but you know, you got people coming to pick up their kids, and so in the morning and the evening during the week, it's all lined up with cars, and then it ends up that the school teachers park on the street there.
Thank you. If you could wrap up.
Yeah. So anyway, that's our concern is that we need to do something about the parking, because all we're doing is adding to the problem. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking?
David Thom. I own the property at 313 West 38th Street and have a business there, The Groomsman. I've been there for 25 years. And I have a problem with the parking situation also. I think if you're granting that many variances, that the project is probably way over scale and should be considerably smaller. If you're granting a height variance so that the building can be 5 stories tall, I think the ground level, if underground parking is unacceptable, should be a parking lot, like at the Hiawatha College Prep School across the street. And there's a huge parking problem when there's something going on at church, when something's going on at school, when people are dropping off, picking up their children. The teachers from Hiawatha College Prep park on 38th Street, so there's many times no spaces in front of my shop that I depend on maybe 5 minutes for somebody to drop their dog off and pick it up. So I would like to see something done about the parking. And I, over the years, have checked into getting like 15-minute parking in front of my place, but previously I think it was something under $300 that I had to pay plus $100 to maintain that space. And I don't think if they're going to have no parking for their people, that the businesses in that area, because it's a concern of all of the businesses that I talk to, that we have parking available. So I would like to see maybe 30-minute or whatever the businesses come up with, restricted parking for the businesses, since Jackie claims that most of the people that are going to the Performing Arts Center are going to be riding bicycles and walking. They don't need parking spaces then. Evidently, you feel they don't need parking spaces either because you reduced the requirement from 75 to 1. We need parking spaces, the businesses. You know, it's supposed to be an economic boost to the neighborhood. Who is it boosting? Center for Performing Arts, not the businesses at 38th and Grand. Plus, Grand Avenue.
Mind wrapping up? The time is up.
Grand Avenue is going to be rebuilt, and the city has not told us if they're going to take parking from one side of Grand Avenue. So that's another issue that fits into this whole thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking?
Hello, my name is Ben Mudra. I'm the principal at Lake Country School. I reside in St. Paul. You still want my address?
Well, we do need it for the record.
Sure, no problem. 1388 Inglewood Avenue.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I just want to say that up front that Lake Country School is supportive of this project and also confirm that we do have an open agreement both with the church and with the Center for Performing Arts, that our parking lot is open and available for people in the neighborhood when we are not in session and we are not using it. And I think it's a great opportunity for this community and this neighborhood to have something very special, and I think it will add a lot of vibrance, and I think it'll have a great impact. And I do hear concerns, and I do understand concerns around parking. And those are things that the school and I think the Center for Performing Arts, just in terms of calendar, is something that Jackie and I have already talked about in terms of aligning our calendars as to when events are happening during evening and off hours. So something that we're aware of, and I think it's something that we are going to find ways to lessen the impact as much as possible. And the school's done that over the past decades, really, just to try to mitigate and kind of handle the issues around parking. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking? If you could say your name and address for the record.
Great, thanks. Hello, good morning. My name is Eric Takeshita. I live at 4737 Harriet Avenue. Council members, committee members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. As I understand, this is an appeal for a variance, and that the appeal is based on the idea that there is no practical difficulty at the site. And what I understand is that the practical difficulty of the site is actually the existing building, the size of the remaining lot, right? The ability to actually put adequate parking on that space given those parameters, right? Without further endangering the public through curb cuts or other kinds of measures. So that's how I understand this, right? So narrowly then, in your function as a quasi-judicial body, it strikes me that there is actually a practical difficulty, right? That staff has articulated the practical difficulty, and it seems as if this variance would be appropriate. So I'm here speaking in support of the variance. It seems to me that there's a difficulty and that the appeal should actually be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else interested in speaking? All right, not seeing anyone, I'm going to now close the hearing. Is there any discussion or motions from my colleagues? Councilmember Ellison?
Yeah. You know, based on everything that we've heard and some of the questions that I think some of my colleagues also asked, I feel like it's appropriate to deny this appeal. So I would move to deny the appeal, and you know, I'm open to hearing from other folks as well.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of see it a lot the way Mr. Takeshita sees it, and I analyze it that exact same way. However, and I would support denying the appeal. However, I do think they brought up an interesting question with regard to how they could work with the city and the business owners and the council member's office, and they're here today, to figure out if there is a way that the city can participate in some sort of parking changes in the area. That's not something that we can do at this committee level, but the idea of angle parking has been brought up in my ward in the Harmon Historic Auto District, so there's a similarity there. And although there might be some timeline issues with when we would be repaving or doing something else on the street, I don't know that that's in the queue for CLIC, but I do do think it's something, you have an awesome council member, and potentially they could work with Public Works to address those issues. I'm especially sensitive to the small business issues, and I don't think a redesign is needed in order to mark some of that parking 30 minutes so that the businesses have access to it. So I think there are some alternatives that could be short of granting the appeal that could help ease the burden, and it's up to us collectively as an entity to work with the various partners to make that happen.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. Councilmember Ellison's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and that motion carries. Finally, number 2 is the consideration of an appeal submitted by Lambert Properties regarding 2 decisions of the Planning Commission related to the property at 3311 Broadway Street Northeast, and we begin with the staff presentation.
Morning, Chair, Commission members. Again, this item before you is an appeal of the decision of the Planning Commission approving a conditional use permit and site plan review associated with the proposed accessory automobile convenience facility located at 3311 Broadway Street Northeast. Costco went through a PDR in 2015 to move into the site. They went through a large reconfiguration of the parking as well as curb cuts. That process was approved by all necessary departments. Costco has made an application to carve out the corner in the south there and provide that accessory automobile convenience facility. The applicant's appeal stems from 2 issues. First, that the project fails to meet the required findings. And second, the project is inconsistent with zoning and comprehensive plan policies. So first, the project fails to meet required findings. Again, this project did go through that PDR in 2015. Public Works approved. The canopy proposed associated with this is just under 6,000 square feet, or about 1% of the site. With this permit, they will need to go through PDR as well. Public Works will have another look at this project and make their comments to the applicant. But being that it did go through in 2015, staff felt comfortable that traffic, the location of the curb cuts, all of those were in place where we can make those findings. The second point of the appeal, inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. Again, Minneapolis Plan for Sustainable Growth is the current comprehensive plan. That plan requires a conditional use permit for this proposed accessory automobile convenience facility. The applicant sought that CUP. Planning Commission granted. So again, while 2040 may have one stance on this use, the current comprehensive plan is in place, and that's how this project is being analyzed.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, thank you. And next, I'd like to open it up for give the appellant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Is there a representative? Nope. Thank you. If you could say your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Chair. Jacob Steen with Larkin Hoffman Attorneys, and we represent Lambert Properties LLC, and my address is 8300 Norman Center Drive in Bloomington. So we oppose this project on the basis of inequitable treatment, the fact that it fails to meet the required findings, the fact that it's inconsistent with city policies. This project has benefited from disparate treatment from similarly situated properties. Unlike every other gas station project in the city, whether it's new or modified, this project has not gone through PDR for this gas station project before it would go through the CUP analysis. Now, why is that important? Because PDR is the administrative process whereby Public Works staff is able to review this project and the TDMP, or Transportation Demand Management Plan, which will inform the findings that are brought before the Planning Commission. Now, Costco did go through in 2016 for PDR, but that application specifically identified this as open space. And when they were asked in response to Public Works' concerns that were clear that this required that this was going to cause traffic concerns and required a TDMP. That TDMP was submitted, but it specifically stated that unlike other Costco's, which have higher traffic because of gas stations, this Costco won't have a gas station. So what that means is that those considerations and those assumptions did not include the gas station. So why is that significant? Because this project is not proposing any changes to the ingress and egress on this site. There are going to be 18 fueling stations, so 18 cars fueling at the same time with an additional 18 in the queue. They're all going to be routed through the existing one-lane entrance off of Hoover, and all of that traffic is going to be either routed through the site onto Broadway or down Hoover onto Broadway. So because the Planning Commission did not have this information, because staff did not have this information, because for some reason this project did not go through PDR, unlike every other single gas station in the city cannot conclude that it meets the required findings for the CUP. We cannot conclude that it meets the finding that this will not be detrimental to the health, safety, and public welfare, and we certainly can't conclude that it's going to mitigate all traffic and congestion on site, which is finding number 4. Now, this project further is inconsistent with several city policies, both existing and soon to be adopted. This project, as you know, is in an industrial employment district, and an industrial employment district is intended, as you all know, to preserve spaces for high-quality industrial jobs to the tune of 20 to 40 jobs per acre. Now, I have stood before this body, and I have seen this body reject plans on the basis that a project cannot meet that job density requirement. And this job, or this project, will include exactly 1 gas station attendant job over 1.5 acres. So that's less than 1 per acre, which is well short of the policies which are in effect and are adopted for the industrial employment district. And further, this project is inconsistent with the direction that the city has gone generally with respect to automobiles and automobile-related uses. The 2040 plan, as you know, which is not adopted yet, is a big, bold vision for the city. It embraces land use planning in the context of environmental issues, climate change, and social justice, and it is a laudable goal. And as part of that plan, the city will prohibit all new gas stations. So in effect, this gas station will become, within a matter of few weeks, non-conforming. And because it's non-conforming, we can almost guarantee it will never change. It will never shrink. It will never go away because it becomes more valuable. And while I understand that you cannot make decisions based on those new policies, the fact that the city has spent so much time and energy developing those policies and policies related to automobiles just further demonstrates why this project should not be treated differently than literally every other gas station project that has come through. In fact, we're not asking for this to be treated differently. We're asking it to be treated the same as everybody else. The Holiday nearby went through a TDMP before going through Planning Commission, as did every other project. So for these reasons, we're asking that you deny this project. And if you can't deny the project, we at least ask that you direct the applicant to go back and start the process in the manner that it should. Go to PDR, prepare a TDMP, and go through the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you. Mr. Steen, do you represent a gas station?
I do.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that because you didn't tell us who Lambert Properties was. And so I just wanted to make sure I understand that you represent a gas station that doesn't want another gas station.
Absolutely, absolutely. Metro Petro at 2700 University Avenue, and it's in our correspondence. So Metro Petro particularly sees this as a twofold. One, it's an existential risk because this is a huge gas station that is going to exist there forever. But it also is being treated differently than Metro Petro has. Metro Petro has gone through numerous land use applications, including just to rebuild that structure. A TDMP was required before the Planning Commission. So again, this is about equitable treatment and respecting the process.
Thank you. Any other follow-up? No. Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. Next, I'll give the project applicant the opportunity to address the committee. Is the applicant here or representative here? If you could state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. Steve Sobraski from Landform Professional Services, 2043 Fairmount Avenue, St. Paul. I just wanted to clarify a few items that were presented in the appellant's letter. Namely, again, the circulation that was described is a little inaccurate, I guess. The access movements throughout the site, yes, they would be entering predominantly through the Hoover access to get to the gas station. However, once they leave there, they're not encumbered by a one-lane a traffic route throughout the site. The traffic patterns are such that they are two-way traffic, and in fact, the drive lane that is directly adjacent to the field facility is 30 feet wide, so it's a little bit wider than normal as well. So we're not concerned with on-site vehicular circulation and conflicts with pedestrians throughout the site. The gas station itself is, as described, 18 fueling stations. Yes, that is correct. But with that, again, there are 6 through lanes at each of the pumps, and beyond that, there are an additional room for approximately 36 cars to be queued on site if necessary. We don't anticipate that to happen. And part of the reason why the fuel facility is the size that it is to eliminate or mitigate some of the queuing off-site. So Costco has performed a number of expansions on some of their other fuel facilities all across the country, namely in Minnesota as well, and that's partially an operational issue as well. They want to improve efficiency and circulation on the surrounding properties and rights of way, and this is no different. The third part that I wanted to mention is, again, this is not a typical gas station, right? So this is a members access only facility. So the trips, the patrons that are using this facility are not the general public. Furthermore, a large number of the traffic that's generated on site is it doesn't function in a typical Costco warehouse fashion, we'll say, so it's not a retail environment. Nearly half of the trips that are generated from this site are actually business-to-business deliveries, and thus, the traffic patterns and movements throughout the site are a little bit different than what you would normally see at a Costco. The staging areas, typically take place in the back of the site, where the trucks are loaded up and then shipped out to delivery. And that also uses a different portion of Hoover than this access point. So again, the access points and the trips that are anticipated at each of these spots are a little different than what you would sort of perceive. So we're not clogging or pushing all the traffic to those 2 access points. And then, yeah, I guess that's really about all I had. Again, I'm in agreement with the findings from the staff report and the Planning Commission meeting, and I would be here to answer any of the questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Not seeing any questions.
Great, thanks.
Next, I'll now open the hearing to members of the public who would like to speak, and please limit your comments to 2 minutes, and that'll be tracked with a timer by the clerk. Would any members of the public like to speak? Would anybody be interested in speaking on this? Anyone interested in speaking? Seeing no one, the hearing is now closed. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll direct my question to staff. The equitable treatment issue is something that resonates with me in terms of the process. How do we speak to the applicant's case being made around unequitable treatment with the curiosity of not having the PDR process before us?
Chairman Schroeder, Councilmember Wright. My understanding is that when staff first looked at this proposal, it did have to go through the conditional use for the gas station. There was a decision made at the time because they weren't adding additional curb cuts, and that they had met the stacking requirements for on-site gas islands, that they were going to put this through PDR on after the Planning Commission. I would just remind Council that that's not a code requirement. PDR is a process, but it's not required by code. Some projects are taken through what's called a preliminary PDR early. Some are taken through what's called a modified PDR, where we only look at certain elements of a site plan. So it would have probably been preferable, given that we're here talking about it in appeal, that it had gone through the regular review. That being said, I don't think that there was any indication that the additional gas station facility would necessarily trigger a new TDMP. In other words, it may not be decisive in saying that they've got to go back, as opposed to noting that there's a gas station on the site and amending the TDMP. So it's not the regular way things normally go through. There were some extenuating circumstances in that the whole project had come through rather recently. It's a large site. They were adding curb cuts, has a ample room on site to handle maneuvering, which is often what PDR looks at a site like this, is the internal circulation, drive aisles. I think we've heard the applicants stating they have a 30-foot wide drive aisle, wider than the normal requirement. So it would have been preferable, I guess, given that we're talking about it here, to gone through the regular rule of review on that, but it's not required, and I'm not sure it would have been gotten us to a different determination on the site. They will be going back through. They're going to put in the canopy, and again, if there's added requirements on the site, they would have to be factored in. But my estimation is we're not going to see that through that review, quite frankly.
So there's an opportunity through some additional process to actually have them go through that review, just to make sure.
Councilmember Reich, Chairman Schrader, it will go back through PDR before it gets a permit. So if there are factors there that need to be taken into consideration relative to the site plan that was reviewed at Planning Commission, they'll have to be integrated. This is, of course, why in the past, once in a while, we'd get divergent outcomes, and we try to have PDR at the front end of the process so we don't have things to reconcile later. But again, I think that the factor the committee does need to consider is that we are in a time of changing regulations and policy. And it's not a small item to make the whole application go back through the process, because they're going to lose certain entitlements that, as of today, they currently have. But if there was any substantial issues relative to the circulation, the access on Hoover, the internal circulation through the PDR process, they would be addressed. I'm not sure anything coming out of that review would trigger another land use application, to be frank about it. I mean, I'm trying to picture what they would need: a variance for stacking, a drive aisle width. I mean, I'm having trouble envisioning what that might be. That being said, again, it would have been preferable if it had gone through the more routine review of going through PDR first.
Thank you for that clarification on the process before us. So then I will move denial with the staff direction that it does go through PDR with particular scrutiny to the issues raised in testimony.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Reich's motion is before us. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Seeing no further business before the committee, we are adjourned.